On today's show, let's start to look ahead to tomorrow night's game in Boston because that is the biggest one of the season for the Cavs. Plus, we'll look ahead at what the awards races might look like at the end of the year. We'll do all that and so much more on today's edition of Locked On Cavs.
You are Locked On Cavs, your daily Cleveland Cavaliers podcast.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? My name is Danny Cunningham. You might know me from my time covering the Cleveland Cavaliers, places like my Substack, The Inside Shot, Cleveland Magazine, 92.3 The Fan, and a number of other stops along the way. I want to say thank you to you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content, a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode, of course, brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The Cleveland Cavaliers are back in action tomorrow night in Boston against the Celtics in what is, I think, by far the most important game that they have left on the schedule. I don't think it's particularly close, and I think that there's a case that this is the most important game that the Cavs play all season long. And I think that because, one, they should be fully healthy. They have only played so far two games this season with their full complement of players. They had that back in OKC against the Thunder, and that was, of course, prior to trading to DeAndre Hunter. And I'll talk about him coming up in a second here, but that game didn't go well. And then on last Friday against the New York Knicks, the Cavs had everybody available. They had nobody out with injury, and they beat the Knicks by 37 points. They looked absolutely fantastic in that. But this should be, unless there are surprises, and maybe Darius Garland is still dealing with that hip injury. I believe he's going to play tomorrow night. Just when Kenny Atkinson answered the question last Sunday after the game against Memphis, that he doesn't think this is a long-term thing, and he almost said, we would have been surprised if he didn't play Tuesday in Orlando. Obviously, that didn't happen, but I think that the expectation should probably be for Darius Garland to play on Friday night in Boston. Maybe if the Cavs played Boston on Tuesday, would he have played in that game? Maybe. I think it's possible, but I do think that it is important to the Cavs to be fully healthy for this game, and I would expect them to be fully healthy for this game. I don't know what the injury report is going to look like for Boston. I'm recording this just as a heads up a little bit after 8 o'clock on Wednesday night. So the Celtics are currently in action against the Detroit Pistons. I watched part of the first half of that game, and the Celtics very well might win that game, but they look like a team that look as if, hey, we have a big game on Friday. We don't care about Wednesday night. And Jaylen Brown didn't play because of a thigh injury against the Pistons. I don't know if he'll be available or not on Friday in Boston against the Cavs. But this would be potentially, provided that Garland is back and healthy, the first time of the 4 matchups, obviously, that the Cavs have their full allotment of players. Because rewind back to the game that they lost in Boston back in November. Well, they were without Dean Wade, Isaac Okoro didn't play, Karis LeVert, who was still on the team, didn't play. Max Strus had yet to make his season debut. Their most recent matchup, Dean Wade, believe he did not play in that one as he was dealing with that knee injury. And then even the one in early December that the Cavs won, I think that might have been on December 1st when Donovan Mitchell had 20 points in the fourth quarter to lead the Cavs to a victory. Max Strus still had not yet made his season debut. So the Cavs have not been at full strength for any of the games against Boston. And of course, they haven't been at full strength for many games at all. Like, they have played 58 games so far this year, and only 2 of them, as I mentioned, have come at full strength. So it's not as if Boston is some exception there, that they've been healthy against everybody else and they've lost games against Boston because they haven't been healthy. No, that's not the case. That's not what I'm saying. But the fact that they could get an opportunity in what is a really big spot to be fully healthy and really have a significant test, I think is probably the last time this season, I do think is a big deal, and it should be treated as a big deal. I'm not saying that the Cavs should make this game internally feel like more than just a regular season game. But I do think, right or wrong, I think they're going to be judged on this game as if it's more than a regular season game, because these two teams are far and away the two best teams in the Eastern Conference. There is a canyon between the Cavs and Celtics, and the Knicks are the third best team in the East, and we saw what just happened to them against both of these teams last weekend. You go on down the list: the Pacers, the Bucks, the Pistons, who, of course, I don't know if they beat Boston on Wednesday night or not, but like in a 7-game playoff series, I don't see a world in which, if the Cavs are healthy, if the Celtics are healthy, I don't see how they lose to any other team in the East. Like, I just think the rest of the East is mid to bad, and these two teams are great. Like, they are legitimately great championship caliber teams, and the rest of the conference is not that. There is a canyon between them and the rest. Like, it is a significant gap. So because of that, the Cavs are going to be judged on Friday's game just a little bit more than they're going to be judged on any other game the rest of the season. And I think you can make the case on any game that has led to this point in the season. Part of the reason why that is because this is the one and only time that the Cavs will face the Boston Celtics with DeAndre Hunter on the roster. Obviously, they traded for him earlier this month, a couple of days after they lost at home to Boston, and that means he's not faced Boston yet. If you look at the calendar, this is the fourth and final matchup against the Celtics. So there is going to be one opportunity for the Cavs to play a game with DeAndre Hunter against the Boston Celtics. This Cavs team, while they were great before the trade and they've been great since the trade, they are fundamentally a little bit different than they were before the trade. So it's not as if you can just throw the results out for everything that they did or even the matchups against Boston that occurred before the trade. That would be foolish. That's not what I'm saying. But I also think that because the team that played Boston 3 times and went 1-2 against them before the trade deadline is fundamentally different than the team that's going to play them tomorrow and potentially in the conference finals, I think that means that this game on Friday carries more weight than the other 3 did. Like I said, it's not as if you forget they happened. You don't forget what happened in November. You don't forget what happened in December. You don't forget what happened earlier this month. But it makes this game matter more because this is the game that is going to be, in my opinion, the one that's going to look most like a potential playoff matchup. Again, that's if both these teams are healthy. If the Cavs, have injury issues in the postseason, things look different. If Boston has injury issues in the postseason, things look different. Like, I don't need to explain that to you. I think you probably know that if you're listening to this podcast. But I do think that because the Cavs got DeAndre Hunter in part to specifically help in this matchup against the Boston Celtics, it means that this game is going to carry more weight. I also think that this game carries more weight partially because of what I said earlier about there being that canyon between the Cavs and the rest of the Cavs and Celtics and the rest of the Eastern Conference. And it's not just that. There is a very stark, I think, drop off between the top 3 teams in the NBA and the rest of the league. You've got the Cavs, who have the best record in basketball. You've got OKC, who has the second best record in basketball and the best net rating in the league. And then Boston, who has the third best record in basketball. And I don't necessarily think has had the gas pedal down the entire season because they won a title last year. And I just don't think that the hunger that they have is going to result in regular season success. I do expect them to play at a different level in the postseason that probably mirrors the level that the Cavs and Thunder have played at during the regular season. And I think that, the Cavs and OKC probably have another step up to go too, which should make for an incredibly exciting playoffs this spring. But because of that, they're done playing OKC. They played both those games. They split. The one game in Cleveland was great. The game in OKC was just a good old-fashioned butt whooping that the Cavs took. And it was by far the worst loss they've had. I would anticipate that will be the worst loss of the season. This is the 4th of 4 matchups against the Celtics. The Cavs are, so far, against those 2 teams, 2-3. There's no shame in being 2-3. Those are the other 2 best teams in basketball. Against everybody else, the Cavs have been great. Against these 2 teams, they've been okay. And OKC still has to play Boston again this year. They did beat Boston in Oklahoma City. I will be very interested to see what that matchup in Boston looks like, I believe it's in like 10 days or so. It is coming up on the calendar. It's in the month of March. That'll be a very fascinating one to see. But how these two teams, or how these three teams all do head to head, I think is probably going to give us a decent indication of what the postseason is going to look like, right? I do think that there's Oklahoma City has the best chance of the three teams to make the finals, just because while the West is better than the East, top to bottom, I don't think there's a team, and maybe this is matchup dependent, but there's not a team I look at and say that team for sure is gonna give OKC a test. Now, I do think that you could probably, it might be a little bit easier to pencil the Cavs and Celtics into the conference finals in the East, because as I mentioned, the rest of the conference is just not that good, but those two teams still have to go through each other. Oklahoma City does not have a team like the Cavs or the Celtics in the Western Conference. They have teams certainly better than the Pacers, maybe better than the Knicks, the Bucks, the Pistons, all those teams, but they don't have an equal in the conference. Boston has an equal in the Cavs. The Cavs have an equal in Boston. After that, there's a big gap, but I do think that just because of that, you want to take a look at how the team stacks up against the other best teams in basketball. They're 2-3 right now. 3-3 combined against Boston and against OKC, I think would be pretty good. It certainly sounds a lot better than going 2-4 in those games. Not that 2-4 would be the end of the world. It's not necessarily a predictor of what's going to happen in the postseason, but there's no doubt that 3-3 going 1-1 against OKC and 2-2 against Boston, that I think that there's a difference there. I think there's a difference more than just one game when you add it up. I think there's probably a little bit of a psychological difference there too. I do think that this is going to be a game that both teams are really going to want. I would anticipate Boston is going to be locked into this one on Friday night. I would anticipate the Cavs are going to be really locked into this one on Friday night. There's not a game left on the calendar that looks anything like this. This game, I would expect, and I will be in Boston at this game, and I will be able to talk about it after. But my expectation is that this game is going to have not just like a playoff type intensity and atmosphere, but I almost feel as if this is going to be a conference finals like atmosphere. That this is what when the Cavs are in the conference finals against Boston, I would expect it's going to feel pretty similar to what Friday night is going to feel and look like in terms of intensity. Now, we are roughly 75% of the way through the season. The Cavs have 24 games left on the schedule. So let's take a look at where they sit, how things look as far as the awards races go. There's some I think they deserve, others might be a long shot. We'll dive into that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show is brought to you, of course, by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on that action than with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. Plus, if you're looking for a bigger payout, because I know you want to win big, not just win, I know you want to win big, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay. FanDuel's live betting feature keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether you're backing your team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, you never feel like you miss your chance. Plus, the app is very easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets, $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. All you got to do, pick a winner with that first $5 bet. $150 in bonus bets will be yours. Just visit FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to join today. Again, FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said at the top of the show, you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked On Cavs. So we are winding down the awards races. And of course, I'm using FanDuel's betting odds as we talk through this. And I will mention some odds at some point. But in the last week or so, there has obviously been a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the Defensive Player of the Year award race. Because at this time last week, there was a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the Defensive Player of the Year award race. Because at this time last week, there was a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the Defensive Player of the Year award race. Because at this time last week, there was a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the Defensive Player of the Year award race. Because at this time last week, there was a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the Defensive Player of the Year award race. Because at this time last week, there was a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the Defensive Player of the Year award race. Because at this time last week, there was a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the Defensive Player of the Year award race. Because at this time last week, there was a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the Defensive Player of the Year award race. Because at this time last week, there was a really big shift in one of them, and that would be the San Antonio's Victor Wembanyama was the overwhelming favorite. I believe he was like minus 2,400 to win the award. And of course, now he's dealing with a blood clot and he will not play the rest of the season, which means, as you know, he's not going to reach the 65 game requirement in order to be named Defensive Player of the Year. So that has opened up the door for Evan Mobley to take home his potentially his first Defensive Player of the Year award. And at once the Wembanyama news broke, he shot up, right? And he was at that point, I don't remember if he was second or third behind Wemby with Jaren Jackson Jr. It was very close between the two, but they were, for all intents and purposes, co-favorites. Like Jaren Jackson Jr. was a little bit ahead of him. I think at one point he was plus 125 and Evan Mobley was plus 130. And then when those two squared off on Sunday in Cleveland, and they will have another matchup later next month. But when they squared off in Cleveland on Sunday, I thought Evan Mobley by far had the better game. I thought he was better on both ends of the floor, both offensively and defensively, which, that's what this award is about. And since then, he has steadily picked up where he's at in the odds. So after that game, when I woke up Monday morning, one of the first things I did was I fired up the FanDuel app and I wanted to see, where is Evan Mobley in the Defensive Player of the Year race? And he went from plus 130, a very tight margin behind Evan Mobley, to being tied, or behind Jaren Jackson, to being tied with Jaren Jackson at plus 125. And then as Tuesday went along, he went up to, I think, plus 120, and Jaren Jackson fell to plus 130. So you started to see the shift that Evan Mobley is taking over as the favorite. Now, as I record this Wednesday night, Evan Mobley is the betting favorite on FanDuel at plus 110. So he's almost even money. There still is some value there, though. If you do like I do, think Evan Mobley is going to win Defensive Player of the Year, there's still money to be made here. But that time might be running out. So Jaren Jackson Jr. is plus 155 in second. So now the gap is starting to widen. Waking up Thursday, this will be one of the first things I do Thursday morning, is check out, okay, well, where is he? What do these odds look like? And how they look after Friday, I think could be a really big deal. If Evan Mobley goes out on Friday night in Boston and has a really big game, particularly on the defensive end of the floor, I think that this race could change pretty drastically. I do think that at that point, he could maybe become a minus money favorite to where you're having to put up more money just to make money, and the value might not quite be the same. But I do ultimately believe that Evan Mobley is going to win the Defensive Player of the Year award. I think he deserves to win the Defensive Player of the Year award. Mobley is also sort of in the race for the NBA Most Improved Player award. Right now, he's fourth on FanDuel at plus 6,000. Detroit's Cade Cunningham, who is having a fantastic year, is minus 220. So he's a pretty heavy favorite to win that award. Norm Powell from the Clippers is plus 195. Then there is a significant drop off because Tyler Hero of Miami is third at plus 2,000. And then Evan Mobley fourth at plus 6,000. I would not anticipate Evan getting back up into that award. But the other award that I think is interesting to follow, and I can't understand these odds, is the Sixth Man of the Year award. And the Cavs have two guys that are on the board right now. DeAndre Hunter, who, of course, has only played 6 games in Cleveland. Now, they've all been awesome, but he's only played 6 games in Cleveland. And Ty Jerome. And to walk through this, so Peyton Pritchard of Boston is the favorite to win the award at minus 180 on FanDuel. So you have to bet $180 on FanDuel to win $100 if Peyton Pritchard were to win the award. Malik Beasley of Detroit, having a great year, been a big part of Detroit's success. He's plus 340. And then DeAndre Hunter is plus 600. Naz Reid plus 1,800. Russell Westbrook plus 4,500, which I don't think he has a chance because he's been starting so much. Amen Thompson plus 4,500. And then at plus 6,000, you get to Ty Jerome. I don't understand why Ty is not more prominently featured in these odds, because I think the spirit of the Sixth Man award should be, how much of a boost do you give your team off the bench? And with the Cavs, they've been able to, of course, do things better than just about everybody else. Like, they have one of the best offenses in the history of the NBA. Right now, I believe they have the second best offensive rating ever behind last year's Boston Celtics. They've been just historically good on that end. And Peyton Pritchard is having a great year for Boston. But as I watch the Celtics, it just seems like he's the guy that comes in and he fits well into the flow of what the Celtics do. He hits a ton of threes. He takes a ton of threes. That is Boston's entire game plan. They just want to bludgeon you from beyond the arc. And Peyton Pritchard fits in. Like, he takes a lot of those shots. He lets it fly, and it fits with what Boston wants to do. And I think Ty Jerome is so different from that because it feels as if Peyton Pritchard adds maybe to what Boston does well offensively just by fitting in. And I think Ty adds to what the Cavs do well by bringing something totally different to the table than what anyone else on the roster does, right? Like, we've seen Ty Jerome play at a much different speed than Darius Garland, than Donovan Mitchell. We've seen him shoot the heck out of the basketball, which is very important, right, to his success. He's been shooting the three-pointer at a tremendous clip. We've seen him get into the paint and finish really well there with some awkward finishes, and he just has a much different playing style than what the Cavs typically run with their starters. And I think that is a huge benefit to the Cavs offensively. Because when you look at it, I think he belongs higher up in this race, not because of how good he's been. Obviously, that's why he's in this race overall, but because he truly does provide a change of pace for the Cavs. He provides, I think, something different than what they get with the other guys, the starters. He provides that. And I think that should be maybe, and the criteria for sixth man of the year is basically, do you not start and are you good? Which is fine. These awards are purposefully loosely outlined so that voters can sort of vote how they best feel. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But the way I view sixth man of the year should be, what does this guy bring off the bench that is maybe much different than what happens elsewhere? And can Peyton Pritchard do a lot of really good things for Boston? Yeah. But how much different is it than what Derek White can do? I don't know that it's much different. And, part of the reason why Peyton Pritchard is up there is because there's not a huge drop off. And Derek White's a really good player, and that's a big deal. But I just think that the uniqueness that Ty Jerome brings is part of the reason why I think he deserves more love here. I'm not saying that he should be the favorite for this award, but I also think the fact that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guys ahead of him, the fact that he's 7th, I do think is a little bit insulting. Now, there's one more award that will be given out that it's not on the board at FanDuel, at least not in Ohio, but we're going to talk about it. It's the Coach of the Year award. We're going to do that next right here on Locked On Cavs. Today's show brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%. Plus, you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available for any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. That is Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate subject to change. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year from first match. Must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to Robinhood.com/boost. Over 8 times the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Thank you again for making Locked On Cavs your first listen today and every day. Like I said earlier, if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button for me, click subscribe, hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked On Cavs content. And the last award I want to talk about is the Coach of the Year, because I think that Kenny Atkinson should be a heavy favorite for this. And I don't know if these odds are available in other states, but I know when I pull up the FanDuel app, it is not something that can be bet on in Ohio. It's not available in Ohio. I don't know if it's like that in every other state. I've not been to every other state to know. But what JB Bickerstaff is doing in Detroit is fantastic. And I definitely think that he is somebody that deserves mention in this. As you know, their game against Boston is almost over and they're going to beat the Celtics. They're going to have 8 wins in a row, and that's awesome. And Detroit has been a great story this year, going from what they were last year, where they won, I think, 14 games. I think they were 14-68. Like, they were just unconscionably bad. They were terrible. And JB has gone in there and I think done what certainly I expected him to do as somebody who's gotten to know him over the years and covered him up close. I expected him to get to Detroit and instill a culture and immediately turn that team around and make that team better. And that's exactly what he's done. And I think he deserves a ton of credit for that. And what Cade Cunningham has done in Detroit, we talked about it with most improved player last segment. All that stuff is fantastic. But I think it is much more difficult to go from a good team to a great team. And it's not just that the Cavs are a great team. They are a historically great team. Last year, the Cavs won 48 games. And yes, there were injuries. They didn't necessarily, Evan Mobley wasn't what Evan Mobley is now. And I think Kenny Atkinson does deserve some of the credit for bringing that out of Evan Mobley. But they were a team that looked like, okay, maybe this group has hit its ceiling. And that's why so much of the conversation this summer was about splitting up Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell potentially, and splitting up Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen potentially. That group has worked together better than anyone could have imagined this year, because the Cavs went from a team that was good. They finished 4th in the East 2 years in a row. They won 51 games 2 years ago, 48 games last year. They were a good team. But it was difficult to see, okay, well, where does that next step come from? I don't even want to call it elite, because going from 48 wins to, even 55 wins, that's tough to do. Going from 51 wins to 55 wins is tough to do. The Cavs are going to go from 48 wins last year to, my best guess, is probably at least 64 wins this year. Like, the Cavs can lose 5 of their remaining 24 games and they can break the franchise record for most wins in a season. Like, if they go 19-5 the rest of the way, which would be below their current winning percentage, they will win 67 games. And I think it's so much more difficult to take a team from, not to say that JB doesn't deserve credit, because he does. And a big part of this is Cade Cunningham has been healthy, and Cade Cunningham is freaking awesome. But I think it's more difficult to go from a team that was bad to a team that in a bad conference is good, as compared to taking a team that was good to a team that is one of, by just about every metric, one of the 5 best regular season teams of all time. Because as things stand right now, according to StatMuse, the Cavs have the 4th best net rating ever. It's the 95-96 Bulls, that team that won 72 games after Michael Jordan took a year off to play baseball, or 2 years or whatever it was to play baseball, year and a half. The Oklahoma City Thunder of this year, Mark Daigneault absolutely deserves to be in this conversation too. I have not mentioned him, but he does deserve it. The 1996-1997 Chicago Bulls, who they were really good. And then it's the Cavs. Like, that is the kind of company this Cavs team is in. They went from losing in 5 games in the second round last year. Yes, there were injuries, but they were not going to ever win that series against Boston, to now being a historically great team. And the only thing that really changed about that was one coach was relieved of his duties and they brought in Kenny Atkinson. And I think when that happens, when there is a change or an improvement that is that dramatic, when there is that big of a jump in win total from 48 to, the Cavs, they could conceivably, I don't predict this, but they could conceivably have 20 more wins than they did last season. And when you win 48 games the year before, that's almost unheard of. Like, that is not something that typically happens. 14 wins on the low end, what the Pistons had last year, was brutal. That is terrible. That is one of the worst seasons ever. So them improving this year isn't a surprise. Now, is it surprising just how good they've been? Yeah, I think it is. I didn't expect them to be this. I thought they'd be a team that was in the race in the play-in, not a team that could potentially have home court in the first round. JB Bickerstaff, like I said, deserves a ton of credit. But going from 14 wins to maybe 44 wins, that's a big improvement. That's really impressive. It's just like when JB Bickerstaff got the Cavs to 44 wins for the first time. They went from, I believe, 21 wins the year before to 44 wins. That was a big deal. You know what else that wasn't? That wasn't something that won JB Bickerstaff Coach of the Year. Monty Williams got that when the Suns won 64 games. And Kenny Atkinson, if the Cavs win 65 plus games, he should win Coach of the Year, and I think that he will. I'll be back tomorrow to talk more about the game against the Boston Celtics because this is a big one. I'm going to Boston on Friday. Very excited to see what that atmosphere is like. Very excited to see how the Cavs play. I think this is a really big deal. And as I mentioned, I think this is the most important regular season game the Cavs have remaining on their schedule by a wide margin. So we'll dive more into that, maybe some important matchups. And certainly once the injury report comes out, there will be more to talk about there. But thank you for making Locked on Cavs your first listen today and every day. You can find the show anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, anywhere else. Drop us a 5-star rating. Leave us a nice review. Be a friend. Tell a friend about Locked on Cavs. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure a friend is subscribed as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Hit that thumbs up button for me. Click subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest Locked on Cavs.